Some of you here may not have been here, but over the last couple of weeks, we've had a few people stand up and say feel like they've been called to teach, they've been called to get in that sort of ministry. So I kind of wanted to take today and talk about what that entails and kind of what's the guidelines and the structure in which that's supposed to be followed by. I'd like to open it up today with 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1. Here is a trustworthy saying, whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Like I said earlier, due to the amount of people that have been called to teach from the Open Door Church, I felt it's important we look at the guidelines to be a preacher and the capacity of leading a church. As I stated in the opening verse, it's a noble task. Anybody who desires to do that, it's a tough task, but again, a noble one. It's good to be looking for what we've been called to do, but we can't just rush into something we think we're supposed to do without looking at what the Bible says is the rules to do these things. As I said, it's good. We should be looking to what we've been called to do and what we think we're supposed to do and to kind of test the waters and see if maybe, hey, this is working out, this isn't. But also, at the same time, we need to look at the guidelines in which this book tells us that we need to be between to hold that position. So we see a lot of words thrown around today, so we need to really clear up exactly what we're talking about before we get into the guidelines and that you must be in. So first thing I say we need to clear up is what a preacher is defined as. We hear the word pastor, teacher, elder, and overseer, but we need to see what those words are. Are they the same or do they hold different positions? Is the pastor greater than the elders or is it one and the same? We see those a lot, and especially today I'm going to get ahead of myself. Okay on. We start by seeing the word elder. We see this in Titus chapter 1, verse 5. The reason I left you in Crete was that you might put in order what was left unfinished and appoint elders in every town, as I directed you. So Titus is appointed to set a certain group of men in each town together as elders in a leadership position to govern and direct. And then right after that, just 2 verses later, we see in Titus chapter 1, verse 7, the beginning of that verse, we see another word pop up there. Talking about the same people, but he uses the word overseer. Since an overseer manages God's household, he must be blameless. So just from this alone, we can see that the word elder and the word overseer are starting to be interchangeable. They are interchangeable. We see all these words throughout the New Testament being used interchangeably. Like I said, overseer, pastor, and elder, all these things are really meaning your elders. So now we see an example of what these elders are supposed to be doing in 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 1 to 3. To the elders among you, I appeal as a fellow elder. So I'll kind of start right there for a second. So right off the bat, Peter is kind of leveling the playing ground here. He's saying that he is an elder amongst elders, because that's who he's writing to here. So right off the jump, we see that the level of authority is even. It's not that Peter is elevated above this one, or that amongst the elders, which are the governing body, that anybody is higher than the other, but it's a level field, and for good reason, as we get into here later. And a witness of Christ's sufferings, who also will share in the glory to be revealed. Be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, watching over them, not because you must, but because you are willing, as God wants you to be, not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being an example to the flock. We can tell from the surface level here of what Peter is writing that the elders are the governing body of the church. The elders are the ones that make the decisions. In today's church, there's a growing movement to move to business meetings and to vote over issues, and that's just not what we see in the Bible. Kind of what you're going to see there is they take the congregation and they allow the congregation to vote as a whole on topics that are coming up and on the direction that they want to head and the things they do or do not want to do. Which is not a good place to be, and it's not biblical for one. An example that I kind of want to bring up is, obviously as you look around today, you can see that we've gotten to the ministry of helping and rehab and all those things, breaking addiction. But before we were there, the question got brought up, is this the direction that we want to move in? we see that there's a need for people to be helped, and that's where we need to go. And we had the elders here that had that vision and decided that that was the direction we were going to go. But to think about, if we didn't structure ourselves that way, what if we allowed the body to decide on whether or not we went in that direction? Do you think that we'd be where we are today? Maybe, maybe not. It's hard to say. I do know that some people were not fully excited about that, and those people were being included in the vote as well. So that's kind of the danger there. It sets guidelines for elders for a reason, so that the people making decisions are fully knowledgeable and wise and can see the vision that they need to see in order to make these decisions. Secondly, we see that Peter does not hold himself any higher than the other elders. He speaks as if all elders hold the same authority. I mentioned this earlier, but he does not elevate himself at all. He acts as if all elders hold the same amount of authority, to where one person is not above all and can make this decision, and that's just the way we go. All hold the same authority. Then we see the charge that the elders have, which is to lead God's flock. Not Peter's flock, not Kenny's flock, but God's flock. And doing so by being the example, not bearing down on them. Right? So what's he saying there? Is he saying that we can live however we want to live and then tell the body that you need to follow these guidelines and this is what you need to do? No, he's telling them not to bear down on them, but yet you are the example they should look to and live accordingly. Not coming in after a crazy living and try to push what the book says onto them. So to sum this up among the elders, we see that some are more gifted to do certain roles, some leading, some more apt at teaching, and others to the various tasks required to guide the flock, but all equally elders. Right? So some of you are new here, some have not been here long. One thing that I would like to do real quick is, if I could have our elders stand up for a second, that way everybody gets to see who they are and put their face to them. Kenny called him out earlier, but here we have Kenny Burns. You see him every Sunday, of course. We have Dave McCormick in the back here. And then we have my father, Jason Smith. And we have Jamie Nelton. He's not here today, unfortunately. And Pastor Cruz, he does the Hispanic ministry. But looking upon these, look at Peter said, they all hold the same amount of authority. Well, yes, we get to see Kenny up here every Sunday morning teaching, because the group of elders is assembled here. Kenny is very good at the transfer of information, really well at it, and I hope to be there one day myself. But that's why we see from him. But that does not mean that Kenny has any more authority than the other elders, or vice versa. It's a level playing field, and when decisions are to be made, they all come in with equal input. We see an example of this in 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 17. The elders who direct the affairs of the church well are worthy of double honor, especially those whose work is preaching and teaching. So again, here this tells us here that the position of a preacher isn't really actually a position. He's just merely one of the elders that we've decided to do the majority of the teaching. It's not that he, as I said, he holds any more authority. And here again, Paul's explaining this again, right? He tells us that especially those whose work is preaching and teaching. Not to say that's a separate job. They're all an elder together, but some are more gifted in relaying this information, while others may be administratively more inclined, or with technology, right? Jamie keeps us rolling, keeps the things doing all they do. I don't even know how he does it, but he does a great job at it. So now that we I want to circle back so I'm not causing any confusion here. When I say those called to teach, I'm talking about those who aspire to be preachers, as we see today. Not just teachers, because to be a teacher, you don't have to be an elder, right? Those are separate things, but the terminology today kind of gets interchanged with some that it shouldn't. So I want to specify today that what I'm speaking of is in the context of being what Kenny is, right? Being one of the elders, but being one of the elders that's gifted in teaching others. So now that we've learned that it's not necessarily a preacher, but we're aspiring to be an elder, a part of the governing body. So let's see what it says about what are the qualifications that this book gives us in order to be an elder. There's two main books that gives us this. First one is 1 Timothy, and the second one is Titus. We're going to start out in 1 Timothy. Now that we know the preacher is one of the elders, let's look at the qualifications to be an elder. Paul is writing to his understudy, Timothy here, first instructing him to call out false teachers that teach anything contrary to sound doctrine, which is anything other than what Paul is teaching. We see this in 1 Timothy chapter 1 on the back half of verse 10 on through verse 11. And for whatever else is contrary to sound doctrine that conforms to the gospel concerning the glory of the blessed God, which he entrusted to me. Now, Paul starts by giving the guidelines with a rule concerning women. He says that they cannot assume authority over a man in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 11 to 12. A woman should learn in quietness and full submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet. Now, before we carry on completely here, I want to clear up what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. And as I wrote this last week, and I was sitting through last Sunday's sermon, and Kenny was kind of hammering the women last Sunday. And I was thinking in my head, my first guideline here is on the women. I said, they might start throwing stuff up here. We're kind of hitting them hard here. What I'm saying is that it doesn't allow a woman to be an elder. Now, that's not to say that a woman cannot teach, right? An example of this is Jessica Nelback is the one that runs the women's small group. Is she allowed to do that? Absolutely, and she should. Especially those that the younger women coming in should be being guided by those who have a little bit more experience than others. Same way as the young men should be coming in under the men who have had more experience. There's no number of people that prohibits a woman from teaching either. It's to say that, let's say that she was going to teach a big seminar somewhere, a woman's seminar, and 10,000 are in attendance. Is that okay? Yes, absolutely. And I hope that one day she can do something like that.
Next week.
Yeah, next week. Yeah, we'll work on setting that up we're having the flyer next week. I want to clear it up before I move on. But yes, it is okay for them to teach. It's just here is prohibiting from being an elder. And then after that was in chapter 2. As we move to chapter 3, we start to see the more detailed list of what we must fall into to become an elder of the church, which starts in 1 Timothy chapter 3 on through verses 1 to 7. Here's a trustworthy saying: whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Now, the overseer is to be above reproach, the husband of one wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him. And he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. He must also have good reputation with outsiders, so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap. Now that's a lot there, so what we're going to do is we're going to take those one by one and just briefly talk about them and see kind of what they're meaning here and what guidelines we're holding these elders to, so that, as I said, those in the audience who think that they've been called to teach in this capacity, kind of what they need to put themselves in. First one we see is above reproach. Being above reproach kind of keeps Satan in the outside world from grabbing onto anything bad, allowing the church to be attacked through it, keeping us in good standing. That way there's no reason for them to say that the Open Door Church took this man on and look at this, or anything blatant for sure. Now, the husband of one wife. So this one has caused some controversy over the time. In the church today, does it mean that I can never remarry after a divorce or death? Or does it mean that I can only have one wife and to deny a polygamous life? I find that it means that we are to be faithful to our wife, not chasing after women while married, rather self-controlled. The next one is temperate. For an elder to be able to make sound decisions in times of stress and fast-paced times, he must be temperate, able to keep a level head when making decisions of all circumstances. Right? Sometimes, do elders have to make decisions under a stressful situation? Sometimes life happens fast and we see things approaching quickly and have to make fast decisions. Oh yeah. And it calls for someone to have a sound mind to be able to see these and calmly make the decisions effectively for what's to come. Now again, self-controlled. If a man cannot control the things that is going on his day-to-day life and able to tell himself no, how will he ever be able to do it for the body? Respectable. An elder should be respectable in all facets of life, including teaching others. Not teaching as if he is above, but rather teaching a level teaching strategy. And what I mean by that is not to say that I'm all knowledgeable and I'm teaching you who are not, but rather just reading the Word, deciphering what it means, and just purely transferring information from here out there. Not to act as if, well, I guess if they're much better than you. Hospitable, the elder should welcome others into his home. Not only the saved, but also the unsaved. And I think that kind of ties into having a good relationship with outsiders too, allowing them into your home as well, not just the church, because the church isn't just a social club that whoever's in here we have on Sunday and that's it, but rather reaching out to those outside as well. We should be inviting those into our home as well, giving us the opportunity to maybe even talk to them, grow the relationship, and through that, maybe even telling them the Jesus story. Well, hopefully telling them the Jesus story. Not given to drunkenness. Now, this one's obvious, I think. I hope to everybody. You can't be a drunk and a preacher. Like Peter stated above, the elders must lead by example. If we teach that drunkenness is bad and it's a sin, we can't be doing it ourselves and come in here and try to teach that same commandment. Right? We have to obey it ourselves and be that example. That we have not violent but gentle. An elder should not be looking for a fight, but greet hostility with kindness, not giving way to modern theology, but not walking around looking for trouble either. Not quarrelsome. This one goes hand in hand with the above qualification. Not looking for a fight, not looking to argue, but rather teaching and correcting with gentleness. Not a lover of money. Money, like alcohol, can control your life when it is what you are chasing. Don't let money control you, right? Rather, let the Holy Spirit. Now, being a lover of money, that doesn't mean that everybody who is wealthy is a lover of money. This book also calls us to be successful, make wise decisions financially for us down the road. But there's a difference in that and allowing it to consume your life, and that to be your only thought process is to chase more and more. And well, if I want this, well, to have this, I got to go make this. So then I'm going to consume my life with making this money, whether it be with an entrepreneur style or maybe with your employment, allowing your job to consume every waking hour of you trying to get that promotion to make more money and more money and more money, ignoring a lot of these things that need attention here, especially in the body. Now, managing his own family. If you cannot control what goes on inside your home, what makes you think that you can effectively manage the body? Not to say there won't be problems arise in the family. We're all human, but rather, how does he handle them? So it's not saying that in order for you to be an elder, rather, that your family has to be perfect, because if that was the case, there wouldn't be any elders, right? There's going to be problems arise. That's the unfortunate reality. And it's not saying that, like I said, if you have problems arise, you can't be an elder, but it's observing how you handle these problems when they arise, because inevitably they will arise. Not a recent convert. New converts need to grow in the faith before they are put in a leadership position. This ties back to business meetings, right? Where they allow the whole body to decide on what the church's direction is going to be. Well, what if we take one of those members and he just became a member last week? Is that a new convert? Could be, absolutely. And that new convert now is voting with the same authority as the elders to what decisions are being made. And that can be costly, because maybe they don't have the vision, or maybe they have a slight misunderstanding at the moment because they haven't spent a lot of time and grew spiritually in the Word. And I definitely think it's going to make you vote differently. Good reputation with outsiders. A man with a poor reputation outside of the church is not a good representative for the church. Again, like I say, it allows them to grab onto something and say, oh, you put him in charge of the church? Right? Now, people can change, absolutely. But usually when they change, your standing changes as well. The last thing Paul commands in 1 Timothy is that he does not let anyone look down on him due to his age, speaking to Timothy, but rather set an example before them. We see this in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. Like I said, now I kind of take this one to heart myself since I'm of a young age and put in a position usually reserved for those maybe a little bit older or with a seminary degree or whatever that is. But there's one thing you won't find in the Bible either, that you got to have a seminary degree to be up here and teach. It's not in one of the qualifications to be an elder either. The second book I spoke about earlier, we had 1 Timothy that gives qualifications, and then we have another letter, Titus. So now let's look through Titus and see what he wrote to him for the qualifications. Now another letter Paul wrote discussing elder guidelines is in Titus. Paul gives Titus a charge to appoint elders in every town and tells him what they must be. This is found in Titus chapter 1, verses 5 to 9. The reason I left you in Crete was that you might put in order what was left unfinished, and appoint elders in every town as I directed you. An elder must be blameless, faithful to his wife, a man whose children believe and are not open to the charge of being wild and disobedient. Since an overseer manages God's household, he must be blameless, not overbearing, not quick-tempered, not given to drunkenness, not violent, not pursuing dishonest gain. Rather, he must be hospitable, one who loves what is good, who is self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. He must hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. So as well as following these things, it actually also calls us to refute false teachings, as not to just let them go, because that can be dangerous, especially inside the body, but to refute them and correct them. But we should be using gentleness with it. In this letter, the guidelines look very similar to the ones that Paul gave to Timothy. So let's briefly look at all of these as well. First, we got blameless. Like stated earlier in this message, he doesn't have any charge against him that would open the church to attack. Faithful to his wife. This does not exclude a single man from the position, but rather expands upon those elders that do have a wife, or those who are pledged to be married. That man must not have wandering eyes. He must be fully devoted to that one woman, not allowing infidelity to enter the relationship. Because also, another teaching of Paul is that it's actually far better not to be married, because a married man worries about how he can please his wife and his children, but an unmarried man puts his full attention to the needs of the body and continues after them. A man whose children believe and are not open to the charge of being wild and disobedient. This command really puts in the microscope the father instead of the children. What does it take to have believing and well-behaved children? Well, it takes a God-respecting father who stuck to the values God places and used the rod to correct bad behavior. Not necessarily, discipline can be whatever the child needs, but I want to expand upon that a little bit too. Believing children comes from a God-respecting man. So here when it talks about the children, I think really what he's saying is it's putting a microscope on the father in the home. What kind of father are you being inside your home? Are you being a father that raises them to follow the code that we should be? Because like I said, if he can't teach that at home, how is he ever going to be able to teach it to the body? Not overbearing. Leading the church by example, not by grinding down on those of the congregation. Again, the elders should be a shining example of how we are to conduct ourselves, so that, well, for one, that you don't be a hypocrite. Not quick-tempered. Being in leadership means that you deal with all kinds of people. Do you think that an elder ever deals with a difficult person? Or do you think that's just a lie? We don't ever deal with them. Well, you don't think they ever deal with them. We've never had a difficult person here ever. Yeah, of course we have. And with dealing with them, we cannot get upset easy. We still have to remain to be the example when correct them. Even if hostility is shown towards us, we must show gentleness back, because that's what they're going to remember. And through that, they might even come back. Not given to drunkenness. Again, this is Pretty common sense here, but elder cannot be drunk. You know, how much weight would you put on his word if he came in with alcohol in his breath and then began to teach you? Probably not a whole lot, or at least I hope you wouldn't. Right? And the rest of these, we're just going to just brief them again because a lot of them are the same, right? So, not violent, not pursuing dishonest gain, hospitable, one who loves what is good, self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined, hold firm to sound doctrine, and refute those who oppose it. And before I go any further, I want to circle back one more time to make sure that I don't cause any confusion here, right? So, the structure that you typically see inside church today is that you have the preacher's put on a pedestal, and below him are people subject to him. And even in some cases, the preacher gets elected by the body, and then he holds no authoritative power, and if the governing body that they set themselves in the church can vote him out without any authority on his end. And that's just not what we're seeing here. What we're seeing is that there's not a pastor, and that's just one role that we fill, but rather he's one of the elders, but he's been gifted with teaching, so that's what he does. There's some that's going to mainly devote their lives to teaching, but at the end of the day, all elders should be able to teach. To whereas if something happened to Kenny, I hope it doesn't, but if he gets in a car wreck on the way home, any one of our elders should have the ability to stand up here and be able to teach to some degree. Just kind of want to clear it up. It kind of told me something funny here. It's kind of like having the shepherd, the sheep take the stick from the shepherd, tell him how the shepherd's going to lead them, and then hand it back to him and expect him to do it that way. That doesn't make a lot of sense, and it can lead to doom that way. Like I said, if we would allow the business meetings and the authority to be transferred the way that a lot of churches do today, we probably wouldn't have all we have here today. We wouldn't be on our third Matthew house. We wouldn't be saving 600 plus people a year. I don't think these things would have been happening, or it could have been a possibility. But rather, since we structure ourselves as an equal ground with elders with equal authority to make decisions on the future of the church, we've allowed ourselves to be where we are today. And I think it's amazing where we are today. So, to kind of wrap all this up, to be an elder of any church, it takes serious discipline. Being an elder is a huge responsibility, a huge duty, and a stressful job. Is it a stressful job, Kenny? Or does it never cause any stress at all?
I have a pacemaker.
That tells you all you need to know right there. It requires a lot out of the people who wish to be in that position. To teach what is sound doctrine and to rebuke those who teach anything other than what is sound. Having complete self-control, a home that is in order, and a mind that is set to the same goals that God has. And I think that's one of the main reasons why he set those qualifications for the elder, because if an elder falls into those qualifications, he's going to have a mind for what God wants. And the decisions will be made based on that. To lead in the mission of spreading the gospel and saving as many people as we can before we ourselves depart from the world, to be with the Creator in which we have served while being an elder. So to all of you who believe, you have been called to take this upon yourself. Examine yourselves and see if you can align yourself with these qualifications. Is this something I can do? Look at it. And if I see some of these guidelines that prohibit me and I feel like I'm supposed to be here, we need to start making a plan to align ourselves with these things so that we can be in order for what God has set for us to allow us the maximum amount of success that we can have with Him. Now, there's one last thing that an elder must be able to do. He must be able to tell the Jesus story. If he can't tell the Jesus story, right, how is he going to be saving these people, right? That's the whole point of this. Let's gain more people into heaven, into our family. It's nice to have them here with us, yeah, but it's more important to save them, because even if they're here with us and they get to hear these messages, that's good for them, yeah. But if they don't ever make it to heaven, then it was for nothing.